Welcome to this edition of Inside the Human School, where we each share some background on how the human school came about, as well as something that resonated with us regarding the compass points and the mind shifts. We also hope to share a little bit about how we work behind the scenes as learners, too. I'm Rachel.
I'm Randy.
And I'm Chad.
As we engage in the podcast each week, we want to share a little bit about our growth and processes, and then share what we're reading, exploring, or learning about. So the first thing we're going to start with is some insight into how things came to be. So our Inside the Human School question this week is, where did the idea for the human school come from? Randy?
Well, Rachel, that's a really interesting question. So I think it's probably good for our audience to at least have some background on this question. We talk about storytelling, so here's the story. So the story was that I retired I always get the year wrong. It was January of 2021. It's weird because I always want to think 2020 because really I worked like one day in January of 2021. But officially I retired in January of 2021 with about 34 years in public ed in all sorts of different positions. Started out as a music teacher, then I was involved in instructional technology, then I moved to the district that I retired from as the technology director, and then became assistant superintendent and then superintendent for the last 7 years. And having been on that very fast path, so to speak, of running 500 miles an hour a day, and then suddenly when you retire, you hit zero, you become very reflective. And it was also the height of the pandemic, and people weren't socializing. So, I was pretty much just sort of like in my own head and thought like, okay, well, what exactly did I do over these 34 years? And so it was the first couple months were a period of some rich reflection and thinking about the different projects, the different things that I was interested in, the things that were challenges, how did I deal with those? And just basically from reflecting on those and having conversations with people like yourselves and some other folks, coming up with this idea that people just really want more human schools. They want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And they really don't. And that aligned with a lot of the work that we were doing as leadership teams and educators. And the idea that, well, what did we do? Okay, if that was sort of a theme, how did we at least bring about some change within our local context? And just working through different ideas and iterations, lots of different iterations over about 8 or 9 months, and coming up with this thing called the Human School Compass, and doing a lot of writing and the listening. You can hear from the podcasts and the videos, lots of thinking. But I think one thing that's really important for the audience to understand, and that we've talked a lot about too, is that this is going to continue to iterate. What people see now at the Human.School is really just a snapshot in time. And what we hope to have with a lot of these conversations, and eventually have these conversations morph into conversations with other people within the community, that these ideas will continue to iterate, become more robust, become more disseminated throughout communities that find them interesting. But that's sort of the background on how the whole idea came about, through a lot of self-reflection and then engaging socially with other people around these ideas and seeing where they go.
Randy, one thing I'm interested in, and I think maybe you might, the community might be interested in hearing about, is how you arrived at the name the Human.School, because we spent a lot of time talking about how we don't want people to think this is a thing that you replicate, right? So it's not an actual physical school that we're trying to build. What we're trying to do is support the mind shifts, and that's why the compass point originated. It was a way of thinking, not so much a place. And so I don't know if you just wanted to share a little bit about some of that conversation that we had over time.
Yeah, it is interesting when I tell people about the idea. It definitely piques curiosity. The name piques curiosity, and immediately they think it's a school, it's an actual physical place. And I'm like, no, it's really not. It's an idea. And I think the important thing to remember about this idea is not only that it's iterating, but that it's also very much just an idea that you need to take and transform into whatever the change is within your community. This idea that we can scale up a model, or that we can, it's all standardization again. It's the way that we think about so much in our life, that there is nothing standardized. The only thing that might be standard are the principles and the ideas and the guardrails, so to speak, or the compass points. The idea that you start being an objector, you get some questions, you invent a solution. Oh, what was my solution like? How did it do? I need to gather some data. Oh, what that data is more than just numbers, it's stories. And now, okay, well, what is this story that I need to tell? So it's this sort of very, and I think it's kind of content agnostic too. I think it will be interesting to see where this iterates and goes beyond education possibly. And it's really just like the action research cycle boiled down into a couple of different terminologies. But I think it's a pretty powerful idea. And if people want to embrace and do the heavy lifting and fight the inertia to stay standardized and stay the same, I think there can be some change that can be at the local level. And who knows, lots of local change can turn into something a little bit greater than that too. But I think the idea that it is an idea, a set of ideas, and that they definitely need to be customized, tweaked, and placed within a certain context. And that is your context.
Definitely appreciate that. And I know people are definitely going to enjoy hearing some of that background of how things came to be. So the next thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about what we're curious about or what we're learning this week. So one of the things that I focused on or was thinking about this week was around data. It's that time of year for school districts where we're looking at our mid-year data and talking to teachers about what that looks like. And I'm hearing a ton of anxiety, and we hear it every year, around data feeling really personal. And one of the articles that we read looked at this idea of the data that we choose to pay attention to. And the conversations I've been having with colleagues is around how to help teachers and admin feel like a benchmark assessment or a test or a conversation is all just a piece of information, and that taken collectively is how we get the bigger picture, as opposed to the individual test being the be-all end-all of how successful a student is or how effective a teacher is. And so it's something that I'm thinking about a lot this week, and wondering how to help shift that perspective, and in some ways to depersonalize, because we talk a lot about context, and that there's so much that goes into why a test score is what it is, and the tests themselves are not flawless. But that, still being able to look at numbers and stories around information and students is a way to help us kind of move forward with some of what we either think students need. That's a little bit of a dangerous slide, but also have them as part of the conversation in terms of the data conversation and what they need, what they're looking for, how to bring students into that too. So that's a lot of what I've been thinking about this week. Randy, what about you?
So I am currently teaching a class on supervision and evaluation. And Chad has been very helpful in helping me design the class, because it is not definitely something that my mind is always in the right frame for, because it's very standardized in the sense that we have the Danielson framework, we have here in Pennsylvania Act 13, and I have 12 students who are all on the principal or curriculum director path. And how do I help them not just replicate the system, but also to think beyond what is currently there, to reinventing it as much as possible? And so through Chad's suggestion, focusing on coaching and conversations. So that has been really fascinating, not only in engaging the people that are in the class around the idea of supervision and evaluation, but for me personally, I just feel like as I'm reading the Jim Knight text, Better Conversations, and the Coaching Habit book, I can't remember who the author is, apologies, but just sort of like finding that an area that I can grow in too. And it really connects, I think, to the work here. And that another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that I think the secret, if there is one, to breaking the way that we think about things is through our human connection. And that when we have big, hairy, audacious problems, the first step to finding a solution is to finding people to talk to have conversations with. And it's been really interesting just hearing about conversation habits and better coaching strategies and engaging people in richer conversations. I feel like I'm growing in that area, and that's pretty exciting.
It's funny because as you were sharing, Randy, that was I had this like kind of glimmer and smirk, which was that, you're having conversations with your learners, and you're making it more human, right? So the system of supervision is a very inhumane, standardized. You do this at this point, and you do this at this point, and you rate this way, and even though the intention behind it might be human, it's never really applied all that human from a human-centered perspective. And so it made me smile to hear you talk about that, like those conversations. That's what makes the process. That's how you grow from those conversations. So it's exciting to me, and I can't wait to hear more about how that manifests itself this year.
And maybe I should write about it, or we can talk about it too. But it is really interesting to see. We're a little less than halfway through the course now, but how they are developing an objector mindset through seeing new possibilities, developing an objector mindset about the current system of supervision and evaluation. So for me, what I think is really important about higher ed is that we help the people who are taking the degrees and the courses to not only thrive in the current system, but also how to work at the edge of it, push against it, and create and help that system to evolve, and hopefully, ideally, to a more human-centered system. So that's been fun.
So for me, I've been slowly reading Todd Rose's new book. If you're here with us, you know that we're a big Todd Rose acolytes. Certainly have loved Dark Horse and The End of Average, pretty critical books for us. But his newest book just came out called Collective Illusions, Conformity, Complicity, and the Science of Why We Make Bad Decisions, which is such a wonderful title. And there is a quote in the book I'm going to read to you real quickly, and then I'm just going to share a little bit. But he says, "We are so bad at detecting genuine expertise that we will even defer to people simply because they display self-assurance. When someone seems confident, their affect suggests that they know something that we don't." And one of our compass points is, about our collective expertise, right? And so I think that one of the things that's important to us is we need to acknowledge our own internal expertise, but also that we're a part of a community. And this reminded me that oftentimes, we find ourselves listening to one person, that person who is the head of an organization, the figurehead, and assuming that they are right about everything because that person has this expertise. They're confident and they've got experience, and they probably do know quite a bit. This is not to diminish the fact that people who are in positions of authority, don't have strong knowledge base. But this kind of connects to Randy's point, which is that when we do this work collectively, it can help further strengthen our positions. And so that's a thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, how many times do I defer to the person in the room who's the most confident, where I'm second guessing and challenging my own beliefs and my own assumptions and my own value. And so trying to be more aware of not just whether to be very clear, everyone deserves our respect, but we need to be mindful of how frequently we're willing to change our opinions, our beliefs because of that person. So respect is different than those components. So, and then as we kind of wrap up here, my commitment for the week is to continue to read Collective Illusions, and come back next week and share an insight. So, Randy, I'm wondering if you have a commitment for the week.
I would like to take some of this thinking and conversations and put it into writing that we can post on the site. So I'll come up with an artifact. How's that?
That sounds great. And for me, reading Atlas of the Heart from Brene Brown and really enjoying some of the specificity that she's talking about emotions and thinking about how that plays into our work with the Human School as well. So we wanted to thank you so much for learning alongside us in this edition of Behind this Human School, where our goal is to learn in public and share a little bit about how we're learning this week and intend to learn more about in the future. The Human School. By placing humanity at the center of all design, the Human School seeks to share an evolving story of learning and its impact on the world. Visit thehuman.school and its Learning in Public Hub for additional resources and to join a community committed to placing humanity at the center of all design. You can also follow us on various social media. We can't wait to hear how you're intentionally placing humanity at the center. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.